This is Radio NEDS, the voice of the neuroentity dynamics system. A space where science meets presence, where thoughts slow down, and the unseen parts of the mind begin to speak.
So, to kick things off, I'm really curious when we talk about living entities in the context of NEDS, we're not talking about tiny creatures inside our brains, right? What does this actually mean?
Oh, not at all. The idea is pretty mind-bending. It's about these dynamic patterns in our psyche that sort of act on their own. They're not alive in the biological sense, but they behave with a kind of autonomy, popping up to influence our thoughts or actions even when we think we're steering the ship.
That's wild to consider. So, like a deeply ingrained fear or an old habit could actually be seen as its own entity, repeating itself over and over?
Exactly. And what's fascinating is that these patterns don't just hang out in the background, they can override our intentions. It's almost like having a playlist on shuffle where certain tracks keep sneaking back in no matter how many times you hit skip.
That shuffle analogy is spot on. Now, you mentioned these entities can feel almost unstoppable. How does that show up day to day?
Well, think about the times you've felt a wave of anxiety right before a presentation, even though you've told yourself to stay calm. That's autonomy in action, right there. Your conscious mind is sidelined as this old pattern takes over.
I totally get that. And I guess the persistence comes in when, no matter what you try, that old reaction keeps looping?
Yep, these entities can be stubborn. They reinforce themselves through repeated thought and behavior, which is why breaking free from them can feel like trying to change the course of a river. Plus, the energetic side is interesting. People often notice tightness or tension in their bodies tied to these patterns.
I've definitely had my shoulders tense up before a tough conversation. That connection between mind and body is hard to ignore. Speaking of stubborn patterns, what does science have to say about all this? Does mainstream neuroscience back up any of these ideas?
Interestingly, yes, at least in parallel ways. Neuroplasticity is a big one. It tells us that our brain's wiring isn't fixed. Those persistent entities are basically well-worn neural pathways that can dominate until we do something to change them.
So, if we keep thinking the same thought or reacting the same way, we're pretty much feeding those entities, strengthening their hold?
That's right. And then dynamic systems theory comes in. It's all about how complex systems, like the mind, can self-organize. So these entities are like mini-systems within us, adapting and sticking around unless we shake things up.
That actually reminds me some folks mention quantum consciousness in this context. Does that tie in too?
It does add another layer. Some theories suggest our consciousness might have energetic or quantum aspects, which could mean these living entities aren't just mental, they may have an energetic footprint that affects us holistically.
All this science is fascinating, but I keep thinking about the philosophical side. How do older schools of thought frame these patterns?
Jung's work is hard to miss here. He believed in archetypes, universal patterns in our collective unconscious that shape how we experience the world. NEDS sort of zooms in, treating neuroentities as personal versions of these big mythic patterns.
So it's like each of us has our own spin on these ancient stories. And sometimes they take the wheel?
Exactly. And psychosynthesis adds another twist. It talks about subpersonalities, mini-characters inside us with different motives and fears. They can act out independently, just like entities in NEDS. Even Sheldrake's idea of morphogenetic fields comes up, suggesting behaviors are guided by energy patterns beyond just our brains.
It's cool to see how these traditions overlap. Makes the whole thing feel a lot less out there and more grounded in both science and philosophy. You know, the more we talk, the more I wonder, what difference does it make to view our issues as living entities, rather than just bad habits or flaws?
That's a huge shift. When people see their struggles as external patterns, they tend to drop the self-criticism. It's not "I'm broken," but rather I have a pattern that I can observe, work with, and eventually transform. That's incredibly empowering.
I can see how that would make therapy feel way less judgmental. Are there specific tools or techniques in NEDS for addressing these entities?
Absolutely. There's NED Identify, which helps people spot these patterns, and NED Transform for shifting them. Therapists can target the exact entity causing trouble, which often makes change faster and more lasting.
That sounds like a real game changer, and it seems to blend the analytical with the intuitive, which not every model manages to do.
It really does. That combination tends to resonate with clients, helping them feel seen both logically and emotionally.
As we wrap up, it seems like NEDS is offering a whole new way to think about mental health. Do you think this living entities idea is the future of therapy?
I genuinely believe it's part of the next wave. By treating these patterns as real, active forces within us, we're moving beyond old notions that either ignore complexity or blame the individual. It opens up possibilities for deeper healing.
Feels like it gives us permission to work with our minds a bit more kindly, to acknowledging that change is possible, but also that we're up against some pretty persistent forces.
Exactly. The more we recognize and understand these entities, the more equipped we are to shift them and to reshape not just our personal stories, but maybe even the bigger picture of how we see the mind itself.